It's widely known that in the late 1940s and 1950s, the CIA influenced journalists for anti-communist purposes. But what's never been pointed out is that prior to that, psych warfare influenced American journalists to promote the Holocaust myth. We'll give a solid example from the New York Times and show that this guy is connected to psych warfare. But first we'll look at how one investigative journalist investigating CIA-influenced journalists almost backtracked into the Holocaust myth. That would be Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein Watergate fame. We read, "Many journalists who covered World War II were close to people in the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime predecessor of the CIA. More important, they were all on the same side. When the war ended and many OSS officials went into the CIA, it was only natural that these relationships would continue." Also keep in mind the Holocaust myth while reading the following Bernstein passage. "You had a gang of people who worked together during World War II and never got over it," said one agency official. The article mentions the usual suspects. For many years, Luce's personal emissary to the CIA was C.D. Jackson. Bernstein then writes, "By far the most valuable of these associations, according to CIA officials, have been with the New York Times, CBS, and Time Inc." Bernstein's article even mentions an incident where the CIA gave a New York Times journalist a briefing paper and the journalist gave it to the printers and put his name on it. That's interesting because it's quite similar to the example we're about to give. We go back to the Buchenwald table. When a delegation of United States senators went to Buchenwald and viewed the table objects here, the senators were not told it was a psych warfare operation, which began a bad precedent of covert operations fooling elected officials. But did it also begin covert operations using journalists to fool the public about the Holocaust myth? This is the second front-page New York Times article on a concentration camp. The problem is that it uses nearly verbatim sentences from the psych warfare movie directed by Billy Wilder. Let's compare.
"The ovens of extremely modern design and heated by Koch were made by a concern which customarily manufactures baking ovens. The ovens of extremely modern design and heated by Koch The ovens of extremely modern design and heated by Koch were made by a concern which customarily manufactures baking ovens. 1,200 civilians walked from the neighboring city of Weimar to begin a forced tour of the camp. There are many smiling faces, and according to observers, at first the Germans act as though this were something being staged for their benefit. At first the Germans act as though this were something being staged for their benefit. At first the Germans act as though this were something being staged for their benefit. One of the first things that the German civilians see as they reach the interior of the camp is the parchment display. On a table for all to gaze upon is a lampshade made of human skin. One of the first things that the German civilians see as they reach the interior of the camp is the parchment display. One of the first things that the German civilians see as they reach the interior of the camp is the parchment display.
Reporters are supposed to see with their own eyes and write with their own words, but Gene Caravan's words are coming from a propaganda movie script. A court of law would call it plagiarism, but we'll call it cooperation, involving the sharing of a script which has not yet been made into a movie. It's exactly what Bernstein's article is about, except it didn't start with the Cold War. It began with the Holocaust myth. To summarize, after C.D. Jackson and others manufactured the Holocaust myth to justify war, they then went on to portray communism in a way to justify war. Because these people already knew how to fool everybody and were experienced in covert operations, you've got to wonder if they had anything to do with the JFK assassination. All this brings up a novel by Philip K. Dick called Time Out of Joint, written in 1958. In the book, the main character is trapped in a government-created 1950s alternate reality where the daily small-town newspaper is secretly manufactured by the government to make the main character unwittingly support the war. And at one point he reads a magazine. Something like Life, but the paper was not as high quality as the Loose Publications paper. On an unconscious level, Philip K. Dick had an idea of what was going on.